All right, everyone. This is Tim Cain, Creativity Under Pressure. This one is from 1 month ago. Creativity under. I don't know what kind of pressure he's talking about, but I'll tell you what. Trying to be creative when there's a lot of stress going on, it's very difficult. It's very, very challenging. And I don't know if I have any good solutions. Maybe Tim's got some good solutions for that. Other than that, this is exactly why I don't want to crunch on for Microraptor games. We just won't do it. It's going to be in our contracts. It never results in a better game. It really doesn't. There's no point to doing it.
Hi, everyone. It's me, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
Today I want to talk about creativity under pressure.
Yeah.
Now, what made me think of doing this? This relates to a bunch of videos I've done before, and I'm going to mention them as I go along. But I read a quote from Carl Bartos, who was a band member of Kraftwerk. And he said,
Oh, I like Crawford.
quote, creativity sometimes starts with a deadline and with a lack of money and with only a few possibilities with not too many options. Wow.
He's
That's
right.
a good expression of doing art in a medium where just making that art costs money and making that art requires a group.
I mean, he's. I think he's 100% right. Like I mentioned, oh, you shouldn't crunch it's bad, but at the same time, putting constraints on designers and on design as a whole, or just any creativity, forces you to think outside the box because it's very easy if you have okay, we have 2 weeks to have this system in the game or have the system designed. It's very easy to come up with designs that take more than 2 weeks to make. It is a hell of a lot harder to come up with designs that can fit within the 2 weeks of development, and that forces you to like go to your team, go to your leads, sit down, think of things, and just get creative. So yeah, I think that's a really good quote. I like that.
And making that art is part of an industry. So I've talked about crunch and pressure and all this. So I'm going to do a bit of a deep dive into this. I'm wondering if this is going to be controversial or not. I don't think anything I'm saying is controversial, but we'll see what happens in the comments. So,
Don't worry, Tim. If you don't see anything controversial, I promise I will. No one cancels
there was a
Tim.
video I did where I talked about the worst interview I ever had.
Yeah, I
Um,
think we saw
and in
that.
it, I mentioned how excited I was to possibly work at a big company on a big IP. I mean, I've worked on some major IPs, but when I worked on them, it was always 30, 50, maybe 100 people.
I remember that one. Okay, so for a little bit of context for that, and we watched that video. It should be up on our YouTube. Um, he was he was asked by somebody. We think it was Todd Howard, or we think that it was Bethesda, maybe, but I could be wrong on that. Just a very well known RPG maker had set up a meeting saying that they wanted him to have a leadership role in like their new game. And Tim was really excited. And then he got there, and during the interview, they're like, "Oh, it's for the localization department." And if you know Tim, that's not what he does. That's not what he's good at. It's like this guy is an RPG mastermind legend here. He can program, he can design. For the My Little Pony game, I don't know who it was for. He didn't mention the name, but I'm really curious. I'm very curious because it's just so it's kind of insulting. I think I mentioned that it was insulting that I felt bad for him and I felt insulted for him. That how can you not know? You know Tim Kaine, you know what he's done, but you go to him and you say, "Yeah, we want you to head the localization department." I don't know.
Nothing huge. The one time I got to work on something really, really big at Carbine, there were other factors that led to that not working out. And by the way, I've seen people say, yeah, I don't think I'd like to work with Tim. What do these two things have in common? And this is where I think I'm going to start saying things and people are going to go, wait, here's what I'm going to say.
Okay.
To make something great, to make a really great game, and not just a product, but a really great game, you need a great team.
Yeah.
See any of my videos about Fallout and how lucky that we just got a great team, and maybe it wasn't luck, maybe part of it was the filtering that happened at the
That can't be
beginning
the
where people
controversial
had
part,
to come
though.
on their own time after hours, unpaid, to start coming up with IP ideas. I don't know. All I know is Fallout was great. It was great to work on it. It was a great team. It turned into a great IP, and I think part of it was just great people working on it. Here's the problem.
Passion.
If you take any element, any game feature in a game and make it mediocre, you run the risk of that great game just becoming a good game.
100%. And it's it's 100%. It's like if everything else around a game is amazing, but you have that one system that is just okay, everybody's going to focus on that one thing that's just okay, especially the closer it is to your core pillars, right? Um, I mean, we can use, I guess, an example. It's really not that great of an example, but I mentioned, how Starfield is like, there are some good things in Starfield. The problem is the rest of the game is mediocre. Nobody focuses on the things that are decent because the game is just mostly mediocre. I don't know what's a good example off the top of your mind that maybe like Elder Scrolls Online, I guess, is one that I can think of too, where there's some really cool things about Elder Scrolls Online. The lore, all the different regions you can go to, the NPCs, the voice acting is really good, but the combat is just really bad, and it's really fucking boring. And I can't play more of that game because the combat that you're asked to do all the time is just really, really, really bland. It's like if you do 1,000 good things and end up doing one bad thing, people will focus on the one bad thing. Yeah, yeah. Can make good combat, so animation canceling is a thing. Yeah, I mean, Tim here has worked on WildStar, right? WildStar, for all of its problems, I remember I remember the combat. The combat was a lot of fun. Like I miss that game.
Especially if for the person playing it, that feature was really important. If
Yeah,
someone really,
yeah.
really cares about how good gun combat is, they may not like an RPG because the gun combat's only If they really, really want reactivity, they may play an RPG and go, it's not really responding to me.
I mean, another great example. It's that's why for ours it's like reactivity is key to this game. It's why I spend so much time adding reactivity to the NPCs, and I want to add so much time, or I want to spend so much time adding reactivity to the world. Is because that's what will make our game feel like an RPG. It's not going to have randomized loot. You're not going to have levels in Cauldron Chronicles or perks that you unlock with XP or whatever that bullshit. But that means that the I need to grab at the heart of what makes an RPG fun, of what makes it you playing that role enjoyable, and I think that it's going to be reactivity, not a more modern sense of RPG where it's about stats, leveling up, and loot necessarily.
And that's why they may not like MMORPGs. If someone really wants to make their own character to play through a story,
Yeah.
an RPG that hands you a character is not going to be for them. And it could be a great, great game, but for them it's just mediocre.
Witcher 3 is a good example. Like people who play Witcher 3 and are like, "Oh, I wanted to play my own Witcher." Well, it's not really what that game's about. It's about Geralt, right? You're playing a named character.
It's like, I don't get to make my own character. I'm playing someone else's character idea. And already it takes that great game and ratchets it.
But you can fix that with marketing, right? It's about communication with your audience. If you have marketed Witcher 3 as a game where you can play your Witcher character the way that you want, and then it comes out and you play as Geralt. Well, obviously that's a miscommunication, right? That you've mismarketed the game and people have come into your game with the wrong expectations. That's one of the reasons why demos are so important and so useful, is because you can use that to set expectations for free, and then players who wouldn't really like the game can see it and be like, okay, yeah, this game is not for me. Uninstall. And they're not going to write a bad review. They're not going to refund it, and you have to deal with that bullshit. They're just going to say, yeah, I played the demo, wasn't really my thing. Moving on. You never really like RPGs that force me to play someone. I am okay with both. It just depends on which one. It just depends on, I guess, what I'm expecting. And if I expect one thing and get delivered the other, like Tim says, that's where that friction can be caused.
Sit down. Now, these are all elements that may not factor to your taste, but what I'm talking about is a game element that no one really likes. It was done in a very half-handed, half measure, and I think And trust me, I know I've read reviews of my own game where someone said, this they phoned in this, or I didn't like this. I get it. So trust me, I know the
Yeah,
difference between
same.
something is to someone's taste and a feature wasn't done well for the majority of the people who are playing it. So I'm just saying, if you want to make a great game, you have to have all the features be great, or a lot of them, the really important ones,
Yep.
which requires a great team. Great teams are made up of great people, and that means somewhere along the line, someone had to select them. There was judgment involved in that. I don't see any other way how you can put a team together without looking at their skills, judging them, and deciding whether or not they're going to be on the team.
He's right.
This is how you make a great game and not just a product. So I
Todd.
see people complain, sometimes simultaneously, about getting judged,
Cut that.
about crunch, about passion is a negative thing, and I get some of that argument. But I also want you to think of something. If you're going to want to make a really great game and you're really going to want to get good at what you're doing, you're going to have to experience some pain, some pressure, some discomfort, whatever you want to call it, something, in order to get better, in order to hone your craft.
Yeah, I mean, he's right. It's you can't just. I've seen people like this. I have colleagues who are working in companies that are like this, where people who have these grandiose titles under their belt, they rest on their laurels. They don't get better. They think, oh, this is how we did it, and it worked perfectly in this game, so I'm just going to continue doing that. And ultimately, what they end up being is the team's weakest links, because they're not actively trying to get better. They're not trying to better themselves. And you could say, Kojima is an interesting character. For better or worse, one thing that I really appreciate and respect about him is that he seems to always try to outdo himself. Always. He's never resting on his laurels. It is always, what's the next game that can challenge me and my team to do something that has not been done before, or that we have not done before. And I respect that, and it's like you're going to end up with some flops because of that. You're going to end up with some games that are a bit maybe controversial in terms of like gameplay, right? Like they're not, I guess Death Stranding was one of those, right? A bit controversial with its gameplay. But you have to keep pushing, you have to keep going, and you need that team who is constantly trying to make each other grow. That's saying, okay, well, what if we did this? This has not been done before. Let's try this. Hideo Kojima is someone who is more into storytelling and filmmaking. I think he said that himself, but he chose games as a way to do that. Yeah, and I think sometimes it works really well, and sometimes it's kind of like meh. Like, I guess the stories of his games are not always the most sensical, and the characters are outlandish in a way that kind of is immersion breaking. But I'll tell you what, a lot of times he does gameplay really well. If I think stealth action games, I think Metal Gear.
Which you have to do if you want to make a great game. And by the way, here's a quick corollary. Just because you worked on a good game doesn't mean you were the reason it was good. I've had
Exactly. Stop hiring people who were, oh, I worked at CD Projekt Red when we made Witcher 3. Okay. Yeah, and what did you do? How did you make that game better? How? I hate seeing that. Oh, it's made up of veterans from this studio and this studio. Yeah, and you know what? Veterans from studios can still produce shit. Now, I think there's a correlation that more experience can generally mean that you've been in the industry long enough to have had certain things about you vetted, and there's maybe a higher likelihood that you can produce that consistent quality, but it is not a for sure thing. I worked on Witcher 3. I was the guy who renamed all the files. Yeah, I was the Jira jockey.
Had people say this about me. My only response to that is look at someone's entire body of work. If someone was involved in a lot of really good games, they may have been the person contributing it to it being good.
Mm-hmm.
Now, yeah, maybe they just got lucky and got involved in a series of good games. And the corollary to that is, what if someone worked on a good game and then their next ones weren't that good? Maybe they were the reason it was good, and then they got unlucky on the subsequent games and got put in with some teams who were just phoning it in.
Yes, 100%. I think there's a lot of emphasis placed on teams and individuals being hired based on the quality of their last game. And even in cases where it isn't, like, let's just say like this, you have a game that is designed really well, the art's great, and then the game just bombs because it's too buggy, and the programmers didn't do their jobs well. And it's like, well, now everybody gets blamed because your game has a 40% positive on Steam, even though it wasn't the artist's fault that the game was bad. Or, it's like Star Wars Outlaws. The artist did a fantastic job of that game. The animations are generally pretty great. I have no complaints about it. I think they did a really great job modeling the cities. The game, from a design standpoint, though, especially the combat design, is just trash. It's just not great. It's below mediocre. It's frustrating. And it has nothing to do with the artist, and arguably it doesn't have anything to do with the programmers, unless maybe certain aspects of the design couldn't have been done because the programming team said that they couldn't do it or something. So it's like, you have to ask yourself, what was it about this game that failed? You can't just look at a Steam review and say, oh, I don't want to hire this person because the last game they worked on sucked. Well, why did it suck? And then even just ask them, just say, okay, well, look, the design of this was criticized. Where do you think you failed as a designer on this? What do you think you could have done better? And see their answer. Maybe they learned from that mistake. Maybe they made something, they fucked up, they're going to admit it, they're going to show their humbleness. And you know what? I think you should probably consider hiring that person. Said Outlaws was a very, very meh action adventure game. Yeah, it was. They went on being too safe because it was a Star Wars IP. Yeah, I mean, they had to because they wanted to, sell it to a casual audience, which is what the new audience of Star Wars is.
It's hard to tell, but I'm just saying if someone has a lot of good games under their belt, you could probably say they contributed to those games being good. The same way, if a band is really good, those band members probably contributed to all those good albums and all those good songs.
Yeah.
So,
although sometimes, and I hate to pause again, sometimes that can be done because of good leadership. And if you change the leadership, you can fuck up the game even with a team that is very good, very experienced, and is probably very passionate. There are a lot of cases like that where I've worked on with great teams with bad leadership, and ultimately people's skills don't get used properly, or they don't get a chance to shine because of either corporate overlords or just bad management as a whole.
what am I saying here? And this is kind of like it's becoming a meandering kind of
If a
discussion.
game fails, it's hard to know why a game fails.
I'm saying if you want to make something great, not just good, but you want to make a great game, that is going to require a lot of effort.
Yes.
I don't see any shortcut in this.
Nope.
And when you put forth that effort, you also want to see it in other people around you putting forth that effort. You want to see the resulting game be really, really great, not just good.
It just makes you think of the toxic positivity with Concord. The supposed, they said, oh, it's toxic positivity. Nobody can say anything bad about the game because it'll lower morale. And I mentioned that I've been there. I've been in that exact same scenario with a game where anything that you said that was bad was, I was specifically told that I was being disloyal by saying bad things about the game and I was trying to lower morale.
So yeah, there are people that I've worked with that I probably wouldn't want to work with again.
Same.
There are people who worked with me who probably wouldn't want to work with me again.
Same.
I get it. That's fine. I think the longer you work in any field, that's going to happen to you. You're going to collect a group of people that you would love to work with again, and another group you're like, no. And it doesn't necessarily mean they're bad at what they did. It meant in the context of you working together, what they contributed, what they worked on, maybe their skill set didn't align with, and they just made kind of okay stuff.
There's that. I absolutely agree with him. I think that there's a case where there is a lot of money in game dev, and there are people that are very okay with how they earn the money, and people that are not okay earning money in the same way. I think there's a disconnect of values, right, between like a monetization designer for a mobile asset flip game who's like, yeah, I'm happy, I make a lot of money, and somebody who's like, you know what, I don't want to scam people or take advantage of those who are, addicts or like kids who don't know better. They don't have their executive functions fully formed. I've worked with people who just are in this for the money. they're not bad people. In fact, they were very nice people. They were fun at parties. They were fun to hang out with. They were good at their job. They just had different values. And I don't think I would work with them again because I want to work with people who are really passionate about game dev. And those are generally the people that I keep as more long-term friends and interests. So, yeah, I think the more that you go through this industry will just teach you that there are people who are in it for the same reasons, people who aren't, people who don't mesh well with you, people who do, and that's really what you need to find with a team. And I think you can hire the greatest person in the world, the greatest worker, but if they don't mesh with your values or don't work well with the rest of the team, they're going to be a detriment no matter what. And that's why Microraptor, we do hire for, or we will be hiring for, values first. Like, who is this person? Can they be humble? Do they want to grow? Are they passionate about games and game dev? Are they good at in a team? Most other skills can be learned. It's like, well, we're using plastic as our versioning control. Have you ever used that before? No? Okay, but we can teach you how to use that. No problem. Right? Like, that's a skill. That's a skill. They don't need to have used it before. Like, oh, what do you use to model in? Oh, Blender. Well, we are going to use, Maya. Is that okay? Yeah, sure, fine. Okay. Using cardboard. Something that it all boils down from top to bottom, good leadership, and then also having people who know what to do. Yeah, I agree with you. If either one of them fails, you have a recipe for disaster. I agree. Like, I know I'm not very good at production. I'm not very good at handling, like, the business side of things. So if we start to get funding, I'm going to say, okay, look, I feel most comfortable and most capable in a design role. I will be in charge of design and the creative direction of the game. You can handle all, like, the money stuff, and you can handle the production stuff. Like, I had to do that for the time being, but now I don't want to do it. I'm going to hand that to somebody who can handle it better. And, properly handing the reins off to people who are really passionate about what they do and are really good. It's just like, you need to give them space to run. Even if you're a little wary of the direction that they're running in, just tell them what the goal is and let them run in that direction. And I think with really good, creatively, I think with really good game pillars and a gameplay loop and a vision of what the game is supposed to do and who it's supposed to be for, that you don't have to worry. That if somebody is really good at what they do and they're very passionate about what they do, that just give them those tools and tell them, okay, the rest is yours. The rest is yours. From an art perspective, the rest is yours. From a programming perspective, let's see what we can do. And I know that as a designer, as a creative director, that is a really challenging thing because you have this baby of your game in your mind, and it's hard to give pieces of that away. But the more you give pieces of that away to people who are really passionate and capable, I think the better your game will be, and the more you'll be able to sense other people's influence on that product, and the more they will feel loyal and as if they have a meaningful voice in the company.
I know my earlier games, I was still learning stuff. I'm not super proud of a lot of the code in, Grand Slam Bridge or Bard's Tale Construction Set, but I was still learning my craft and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And then when I finally decided that was RPGs, that's when I suddenly started coming up with, okay, I want reactivity. I want systemic reactivity rather than scripted
Same.
reactivity. It's where I started honing the things that I like, that later on people started saying, well, that's a Tim Kaine game. It feels like a Tim Kaine game because it has these elements. This is something you will have to do. You're going to have to figure out, if you ever want, especially to be in charge of a game, you're going to figure out what that is for you. What are the elements of a game that you want to be great? Not good. You demand that they be great.
Boobs.
And when you pick people to work on your team, you're going to have to judge them. I don't see any way around this. You're going to have to look at their work, look at their skill set, and judge them.
Yep.
And yes, when you make your game, to make it great, there's going to be some pressure points. There's going to be deadlines. There's going to be options not available to you because there's not enough money, or there was no one available to put on your team that had the skill set of something you wanted. So you're going to have to substitute that feature with something else. I've had to do that. I've had to do that several times. I guess my recommendation here, the high level thing I'm trying to say is, when you're looking for work in the game industry, understand that for a while you're going to be looking for work that lets you hone your craft, whatever you decide to do. Whether you want to be a network programmer or an artist who specializes in, bipedal animation, or you want to be a narrative designer and write good story and characters. Whatever it is, it's going to take you a while to hone that craft. Once you do, you're going to want to work on something great. And the only way I can see that happening is if you take an active effort and look for other great people to work with.
I mean, let me just pause because he's 100% right. And it's kind of sad because when you start to get in the industry, you're gonna have to take any job. Beggars can't be choosers, right? There's a massive ass line of juniors that can do exactly what you can do, and if you are lucky enough to get to the front of the line at some place, you're gonna have to swallow whatever pride you have and probably just say, "Yep, that's it." And you're gonna be afraid as fuck of losing your job. I get it. I've been there. We've all been there. You're just gonna have to do what you're told, suck it up. But unfortunately, I've seen the passion in a lot of people just disappear when they realize that how difficult it is to get 10 years of professional experience in game dev and how many people fail before they ever get to that point. And not because they're bad people or because they're bad at what they do. It's just because it's so competitive and you will be abused, you will be misused, and it's so easy to have that flicker in your eye just get extinguished at the first bad thing or even the 10,000th bad thing that happens. And there will be a lot of those cases where it's stressful, it's unstable, it's challenging. You're going to be misused, you're going to be shoved into a corner somewhere sometimes and not able to grow. You're not going to have enough time to grow. You're going to have to crunch, you're going to have to give up things. And I hate it. I hate that it exists, but it is what it is. It is the reality. And I can only do my part in trying to build a company that is going to, hopefully change that and be one small glimmer in the dark sky. But that is what it's like. And I hate that what Tim is saying is so right because, I don't know, I've seen a lot of good friends and a lot of good colleagues drop out of the industry or just not. They're like, oh, I want to get into game dev. It's like, oh, I'm trying to make this game, and then silence. You hear nothing back from these people because they give up. And there's not anything you can do about it. You cannot give somebody motivation as a leader. You cannot. It's motivation is something that an individual gives themselves. And the best thing you can do is inspire. I can inspire somebody with that motivation, but I can't give motivation to somebody. That's something that has to come from within. And if you don't, as Naruto would say, datebayo, you have to move forward. You have to just be persistent. You have to push through all the things and all the times people are going to say no and keep you from succeeding because either they're afraid of you taking their job, they don't have the time to spend on you, whatever reasons it is. Just keep pushing forward, keep reaching out, and if you do that, you will get that 10 years. You will get some of that that prestige or that acceptance within the industry that is really hard to obtain. Oh, fuck, I don't know. I didn't imagine this would turn into one of these talks, but we do get a lot of juniors on this channel, and I want to help them in some way, but the best thing I can do to help them is just to say, you can't stop. If you really love the idea of game dev, if you love gaming, and this is what you want to do, then you can't give up. The unfortunate thing is that 95% of them will give up. And there's not a thing that I can do to change that.
Potentially at big companies, so there's more money, so there's less obstacles for you getting that great team together. The bottom line is find your people and make something great. That's probably the best way I can think of handling creativity under pressure, which is
just do it.
Find good people who are good at what they do and understand that to make a great product, there's going to be some discomfort involved. And that is my talk today on how to be a creative individual under pressure.
Another great video. Absolutely great. A lot to think about. I didn't think that would turn into let's talk about juniors in the industry, but Man, I feel like that's a topic that is just consistently brought up on this channel, and I don't know how to. I don't know. I don't know. I try my best, guys. Here's the link. Give Tim a like, and I don't know if you ever want me to just talk about juniors in game dev. I can talk about it because I've talked with a lot of them. I've trained some of them, and it's a mixed bag. It's a lot of emotions. I love game dev. I've met a lot of people, a lot of juniors who love game dev, but the moment they step into the world and realize that there's just hurdle after hurdle after hurdle to jump through, so many just lose that spark in their eyes, and it's really sad to see, but I don't know how to fix it. Thank you guys for watching that. Sorry to end on the sad note, but catch you later, YouTube. See you guys.